Hey, everyone at LabShul. This is Sarah Sokolic, LabShul's executive director. I'm here on Veterans Day. I thought I'd offer up a little special treat today and bring us one of the U.S. Army's finest. This is my brother. Welcome, Ken Rubin, to the Zoom room. Ken, I'm so glad that you're with us. I'm going to have you tell the LabShul community a little bit about you, and then I'm going to ask you some questions because today is a day that we want to honor as Americans and as civically responsible humans. So, Ken, why don't you just introduce yourself? I don't know how they do it in the Army, but name, rank and file. Tell us a little bit about how old you are, your education, your profession. You're just sort of like a baseline of who you are in the Army and what brought you there.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. My name is Captain Kenneth Rubin. I'm currently serving active duty Army out here in Fort Carson, Colorado. I'm a physical therapist by trade, so I'm a medical officer. So I'm currently stationed at the hospital treating right now mostly active duty soldiers, and then we're opening it up to dependents a little bit here. It kind of slowed down with COVID and things like that, working with like dependents and contractors and things like that, but mostly working with soldiers right now. I'm 27 years old. I am from Long Island, New York. I went to school at Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut. I did an undergraduate there in exercise science and my doctorate there in physical therapy. And then I worked for 3 years in the private sector as like an outpatient sports physical therapy practice, and then decided to uh, change it up and join the Army.
So why don't we go to that point? What inspired you to make this career decision?
Sure. Yeah. Well, there was a couple things. Like it was something that was on my mind, for a while, but I knew I wanted to do physical therapy, so I pursued that route. And then actually during like the COVID lockdown gave me time to like rethink things. And I wanted to essentially like I always knew I wanted to give back to the country that, has given me all the opportunities that I've been really fortunate to have. I really value our freedom as Americans, and I know it's something that we have to protect and earn every day. And I found a chance for me to be, a member in the organization that ensures it. And I could do that through physical therapy practice. So that's what motivated me to join.
Awesome, awesome. So when exactly did you join? I know it's only been not that long. And where are you in your training in the Army, and like how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah. So I did, like I said, I worked as a civilian for 3 years, and then I, put in the application packet, and it's a really long process. So it probably took um, close to a year to like get selected. And so I've been in the Army. I joined in July, so I've only been in for about 4 months. Um, and most of that's been in training, what the Army calls TRADOC, training and doctrine. So I did a month at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. Um, and then I did 2 months after that at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. And that was all like military training, really nothing having to do with healthcare, actually. It was all like, like marksmanship and land navigation. And then San Antonio was more like leadership training because it's called the Basic Officer Leader Course. And it was really just teaching you how to be an officer in the Army, because they kind of assume you already know how to do your job as a healthcare provider. Um, and then there was a little bit of training on like Army healthcare. And now that I'm at Fort Carson, I'm out of TRADOC and I'm in what's called MedCom with Medical Command, and I'm at the hospital. So I'm actually just really getting started here. I've been here just for a couple of weeks in Colorado, so I'm still like in processing and getting off the ground. But that's where I'm at. Yeah.
Awesome. From your short time there, it's only been a little bit of time, but do you have a sense of like what's on the minds of the leadership in the U.S. Army right now? Like, do you get a sense of like the vibe? What are people thinking about? Like, what's on the minds of the leaders of our armed forces right now?
Yeah, I've had an opportunity to sit in on a bunch of briefs with like, higher ranking officers like colonels and generals and things like that throughout the training. And then just a little disclaimer that like nothing I'm saying is words of the Department of the Army. It's kind of just my take on what I've heard so far. But a big thing of it, like strategically, is shifting from the mindset of like counterinsurgency to what we call like LISCO, large scale combat operations. So essentially like the war on terror, everything that's been going on for the past 20 years has been counterinsurgency style fighting. And we're kind of shifting to what would likely be like the next conflict that the United States is involved in with an adversary, like North Korea, China, Russia, where the difference is, it's a very different like style of fighting. So it's a different style of training and everything like that. A big thing from the medical side, which like I've been exposed to, is how we're not as a military going to have we consider like air superiority. So like in like Afghanistan and Iraq, when casualties occurred, like the army and other forces were able to essentially like aeromedical evacuation them, like helicopter, get people out very quickly. That's going to change a lot in the upcoming wars, essentially, because we don't have what's called air superiority. These bigger enemies have what like anti-air defense, systems. So like what we call in the medical field, we need to focus on like prolonged field care, doing more care in the field, more ground evacuation, things like that. So it's a definitely like different style of fighting. And it's an interesting thing because all the higher ranking officers kind of like earned their and like got all their experience during the counterinsurgency style war. So it's like it's a big shift in how we're focusing on our training. And then an interesting thing in healthcare that we're doing now in the Army is called holistic health and fitness, which is a big reason I got involved. It's pretty much bringing in physical therapists, occupational therapists, and dietitians down to the brigade level so that we are like embedded with the soldiers so that we could provide care faster and like where they're at. So the Army has definitely been focusing on shifting into more like a holistic health and fitness mindset and focusing on like a lot more like mental health, like sleep hygiene, like spiritual health on top of like physical health. So that's a big shift now, especially with like suicide prevention and like all that type of stuff. So I think the Army is getting a little bit more like, because back in the days, like before I was in, but from what I've heard, it was like if you had a problem, like you didn't talk about it. And that was kind of like to be expected. Now it's like really encouraged that you seek out like behavioral health or what we call COSI, combat operational stress control, because it's not necessarily people that are even like necessarily in combat situations, but just involved in anything could need help. So it's a big focus on like mental health.
That's really, really interesting. And I think probably really interesting for the LabShul community, which is a good segue kind of to my next question, which is you talked a bit about mental health. You mentioned spiritual well-being. On your base and where you are, like what kinds of spiritual opportunities do they have for people to connect to communities of faith or, just ways to connect to, spiritual community?
Yeah, there's a lot. Like they do a really good job with that actually. Like so there's like you can go to any kind of service on base. Like they have every kind of service like on the post. Because a lot of I live off post about 10 miles, but a lot of people, like tens of thousands of people live on post. So they have everything like right there for them. There's chaplains, right? So there's chaplains that have like every different religion on post. And they play a really big role in like the suicide prevention, awareness, and intervention and that kind of stuff. There's also we call MFLAC, military family and life counselor, which is maybe not as it kind of is spiritual. Like, you can get like marital counseling, you can get personal counseling, and it's all free, it's all accessible. And there's also different services, something called the Army Wellness Center, where they do like stress management classes and things like that. So they're, between like the chaplains, the counselors, those different programs, like there's a lot of options.
So are the chaplains all trained to do kind of multi-faith, spiritual and pastoral care, or are there various religious people and places you can go to?
Yeah, there's both. So I mean, there are chaplains, and it's interesting. The chaplains are also commissioned officers in the military, and like they deploy. Like they're there all the time. And yeah, they kind of do both. Like there are like chaplains that are with like specific religions, but at the same time, they're also like trained. They play a lot of different roles. Like they're kind of like counselors too. So like you can go to a chaplain that's not your specific faith. I mean, they're probably not going to like preach your faith to you, but they can still help you with like spiritual guidance. And it's
Yeah,
definitely, yeah.
I think that speaks very well to the LabShul community, who is really a range of faiths, Jews and people who love them, and multi-faith families of all ranges. So that's really interesting. I'm going to segue a little bit. Earlier in the week, we had the midterm elections, which took a lot of people's attention. We were texting together that night as well. Does that have any effects? Does politics and the election, specifically the midterms this week, have an effect on what's going on in the Army world? Like, what was sort of the vibe that day?
Yeah, I can only really speak to, what I experienced anecdotally, which is a short answer, no. I didn't really see anything, which is honest. You can vote on base, which is nice, so it's accessible and encouraged. But yeah, I haven't like no, it didn't really cross my plate. Which in general, what I've seen so far is I haven't really seen politics again, like anecdotally, really impact like my job at all, which is really nice. I've definitely had some good conversations with people. I think that's a cool thing about the Army too, like little sidebars. It's very like it just is diverse. Like it doesn't need to try to be diverse. There's a lot of different like types of people, types of opinions, like types of backgrounds. So I've kind of had like conversations here and there, but nothing like hostile, and it didn't impact like my life at all. Short answer.
Awesome. Cool. That's great to hear. Just getting to the last couple of questions, Ken. What are your greatest hopes for our country?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I could say a lot of things, but I speak one thing that I probably think of the most that is like kind of in my field of like human performance and health is like we just need to be. I would love to see us become a healthier country, like in a lot of different ways, but like physically healthy. We have, I think we're getting close to 50% of our population being obese, based on BMI. I mean, like mental health problems are like rampant. Um, I don't think it'd be nice if there's more like public education about that. But yeah, I'd love to see a healthier country. I know we spend like the most out of anywhere in the world, that out of our GDP on healthcare, but we have like pretty poor outcomes compared to a lot of countries. So yeah, I'd like to see like a healthier country, and then mentally healthy too, like a little bit more resilient. They train that in the Army too, which is cool. But just like, you see a lot of people that are just don't have a lot of like essentially mental toughness. Like they say one thing that they get upset about and it spirals to like, you gotta, it'd be nice to see a little bit more resilience out of the people in our country. And then like more open-mindedness, just to like, I don't know, just to be open to what other people have to say, and not shut them out just because like it bothers you or something like that. Mental and physical health needs to improve.
Amen. We didn't come here for prayers today, but that sounds like one to me. Um, I just wanted to throw in a
Yeah.
question. Today is Veterans Day. Um, our grandfather, Melvin Rubin, was also an officer in the medical corps. How does that connect to you, and what does that have to do with your story and the legacy that you want to leave?
Yeah, I think I think it's really cool. I never met my grandfather. I know you know that, but no one else.
And neither have I, right? So
But
these people only have
yeah,
story.
it's a cool lineage. I think about like the veterans. Yeah, I'm definitely proud to like have both my maternal and paternal grandfathers be veterans. And I think they always say like less than 1% of people do any type of military service. So it's definitely of an honor to carry the torch a little bit and just do my small part, to kind of keep it going. And just to think about the everyone that served, like all the everything we have, and all the problems that we can complain about, we only get to complain about them because of all the people that put in all the work before us, and made it such a good country. So I feel connected to my grandfather, and proud to keep it going.
That's wonderful. Ken, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with your older sister on Veterans Day. I will just end by saying how proud I am and our family is of you, and really in awe of what you've taken on in service of our country and greater humanity. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.